Is Babylon a spy? Was Aleister Crowley a spy? Was John Dee a spy? Good morning. I'm going to talk about magic in the intelligence service, which I know nothing about. Okay. I don't know why I chose to do this on Sunday school, uh, but I wanted to share with you a book by Richard B. Spence, who's a marvelous writer and a researcher and a sort of a investigative journalist. And he wrote a marvelous book called Trust No One back in the early 2000s or late 90s about England's most famous spy, Sidney Riley, who was instrumental in the British intelligence at the outset of World War One, more or less responsible in a way for the victory, eventual victory of England in World War One, and to a lesser extent the United States. He was, in a sense, the pattern for the suave, romantic British intelligence officer that would be the pattern for James Bond. He seduced women all over the world. He was in New York prior to trying to get the United States involved in World War One to save England, and he also wrote another book. Okay, so his Spence's credentials are just impeccable as far as journalism is concerned, and Sidney Riley and the British intelligence. He also wrote this: Secret Agent 666, Aleister Crowley, British Intelligence and the Occult. It's a good book. I do recommend it. And I'm going to quote a short excerpt from that this morning just to whet your appetite. But first, I'm going to turn to a letter written to me, which I published, the letter and my answer to Ask Babylon. Okay. You knew I would plug one of my own books, wouldn't you? Because you know I've made no further provisions for my family's future. So if you don't have Ask Babylon, the good folks at New Falcon Publications would really appreciate if you bought a six-pack of these. Friends may stop by. Okay. But here's one of the letters. These are actual letters and my actual answers back. And they wrote me. They didn't ask Babylon. That's the gimmick here. So I like Dear Abby. Ask Babylon. Dear Babylon, I really don't expect you to answer this letter. In fact, I'm not sure that I'm not signing my own death warrant by writing you. But I'm taking the chance because I strangely trust you more than any other living magician. And I believe that if you answer me, you will tell me the truth. It seems like history is filled with magicians who are spies. John Dee, Cagliostro, Theodore Royce, Aleister Crowley, and you. Are you really a spy? Do you work for the CIA? Is the OTO the Illuminati? I've read in numerous places that you are, that you do, and that the New World Order is part of the OTO's program to bring about a one world government. I suppose you've seen the documentaries on YouTube where you are named by name by a former Illuminati member, and then name withheld. But if you're curious, you could probably just Google around Lon Milo DuQuette, CIA, Illuminati, Satan, or something like that. Okay. You were named by an Illuminati whistleblower. Okay. He said, you are a, quote, Satanist, black magician, and a Freemason OTO Illuminati, unquote. This is so confusing to me. You seem genuinely sincere, even holy. Aww. Your books are awesome, and you write some of the most enlightening and inspiring things I've ever read about the occult. This is, hey, he can't be all wrong, can he? You seem to have a regular life and family, so it's hard to think of you as evil or a spy. I know that there is an Illuminati and that the New World Order is real and that it is evil. I guess if I'm going to be killed for wanting to stop it, at least I'd like to know one thing before I die. Who's in charge? Do magicians get recruited by spy agencies, or do magical orders recruit spies? Like I said, I don't expect your answer. I guess you already know where I live. Name withheld. Well, I don't mean to poke fun at this gentleman that seemed, I think a gentleman, that seemed sincere. It saddens me that something so absurd could so unnecessarily disturb someone like this. I think it's a sad and dangerous thing. Okay. But anyway, here's my answer before I share about Aleister Crowley. Hi, name withheld. First of all, no, I'm not a spy. I do not work for the CIA, and the OTO has enough on its plate without involving itself in the intelligence community. That being said, the synchronicities you're observing concerning magicians and spies probably do bend the statistical curve a bit toward the, quote, I wonder if there's something going on there side of the scale. I've observed the same thing myself and have had an interesting thought that I'll never be able to prove or disprove. It deals with the fundamental consciousness of the individual magician and how the magical environment and the intelligence environment have enough unique qualities in common to bring them together. Both deal with the perceptions of reality. Magicians and spies naturally gravitate to one another as flotsams and jetsam of the big ocean wave of human consciousness. A few years back, I attended a little talk at the International Spy Museum in Washington, D.C. Don't get any ideas. That stress the fundamental job of an intelligence agent is to ascertain a certain assessment of what's happening on the ground, unquote. Now, I know that sounds pretty obvious, but in actuality, it's nothing short of metaphysical. Like John Dee, England's first super spy, people in the intelligence community are striving to determine the most profound and accurate reality of any given situation. If one side's estimation of reality is more accurate than its enemies, then they are at an advantage when making proper political or military decisions. It's spying, yes, but it's also a very real form of magic. And it would only make sense for magicians and spies to gravitate toward each other. Make sense to you? Babylon. P.S. I promise I will not kill you or ask any of my Illuminati brothers and sisters to kill you. If you have anything to fear, I believe it is merely the demon of gullibility. Okay, so that's one of the many interesting letters I get. That's in the book, Ask Babylon, by the good folks at New Falcon Publications. Now, Aleister Crowley. And this might be a little different kettle of fish. I'm going to read just a little bit. I hope Richard Spence does not object to me plugging his book. And it's just by the good folks at Feral House. Okay. Which I tell you it's a wonderful, controversial publishing house. Very early on in my career, in the writing career anyway, in the 80s, I begged Feral House to look at some of my work, and of course it wasn't of this kind of quality stuff. But anyway. So, once again, I am reading from Secret Agent 666, Aleister Crowley, British Intelligence and the Occult, by Richard B. Spence, published by, let's see here, there we go, published by Feral House, and available, and you should have it in your library if you're interested in Crowley at all. Okay. The introduction is called 6 Degrees of Aleister Crowley, and let me just confirm that the introduction is by Spence himself, and yes, it appears that it is. In 2002, the BBC polled its viewers and listeners to compile a list of the top 100 Britons of all time. Political figures such as number 1, Winston Churchill, literati and assorted celebrities dominated the list that emerged, to no surprise. Coming in at number 73, just behind King Henry V, and just ahead of Scotland's Robert the Bruce, was Aleister Crowley, best known in his day as the wickedest man in the world, or as he liked to call himself, the Great Beast 666. Crowley seems an odd entry for such a list. During his time on Earth, his infamy grew far greater than his fame. Nevertheless, in the nearly 60 years since his death, in relative obscurity, Crowley has become a countercultural icon. Even if this falls short of the godlike status he yearned for, it doubtless would gratify him. Aleister Crowley is, few would argue, the father of modern occultism, neo-paganism, and the New Age spirituality. Today, Thelemites, avowed followers of Crowley and his spiritual doctrine of Thelema, Thelemites far outnumber the small cadre he recruited in his lifetime. His motto, "Do what thou wilt," has had a subtle and profound influence on modern culture. While some still fear and loathe him, Aleister Crowley inspires fascination, even admiration in others. Crowley's identification with the occult overshadows his achievements in other spheres. He was a record-setting mountaineer, an outstanding chess player, and a talented, or at least popular, poet and writer. He also collected an amazingly wide array of friendships and acquaintances, albeit mostly brief, and some regretted. Aleister Crowley had connections of but a few degrees to many of the prominent literary, artistic, and political figures of the day, the early 20th century. For example, his erstwhile friend and famed military theorist, Colonel J.F.C. Fuller, was also a guest at Adolf Hitler's 50th birthday celebration. Another friend, the journalist Walter Duranty, became Stalin's favorite and apologist. Crowley had numerous links to Churchill. Among them, writer Frank Harris, a guest at Churchill's nuptials. A large number of Crowley associates shared his interest in the occult, and a substantial minority were his partners in sex, drug taking, magical rites, and other activities, licit and illicit. Much less appreciated is that many of these same individuals also connected Crowley to the intelligence world. Throughout his adult life, Crowley associated with people who had been or would be spies. When one of this ilk moved out of Crowley's life, another, if by magic, appeared to take his or her place. These relationships and transitions were more than a coincidence. Hidden behind his occultism and real or feigned depravity was Crowley's sporadic work as a secret agent for his or her, and then her Majesty's government. This book illuminates that deliberately obscured and much disputed aspect of his life. In 1999, I was deeply researching and compiling researching the complicated and perplexing career of Ace of Spies, Sidney Riley. Now, shortly after this book, and used as part of the background of a famous Masterpiece Theater PBS series called Riley Ace of Spies. And it was a wonderful series. I don't know how many episodes it was. At least it was at least a half a dozen episodes. Sam Neill played Riley, and it was for the day, the early 2000s. It was kind of a sexy, all R-rated kind of thing to appear on public television, and the BBC series Masterpiece Theater, Riley Ace of Spies. If you treat yourself to it, if you can Google around and find it, watch it. But I digress. In 1999, I was deep into researching the complicated and perplexing career of, quote, ace of spies, Sidney Riley. Intriguing synchronicities kept appearing between the movements of Riley and Crowley. Most intriguing was the men's overlapping presence in World War I in New York City, where Riley was working in his own devious way for Britain's Secret Service. Crowley later claimed to have been doing the same, despite the blatant anti-British propaganda he'd been writing for a pro-German magazine, or pro-German magazines during much of that time. Not surprisingly, Crowley's subsequent protestations of loyal Secret Service to England mostly were dismissed as face-saving fantasy. Still, the question seemed interesting enough to merit a look at whatever American security agencies' records might hold on the subject. Eventually, the files of the United States Army's old Military Intelligence Division yielded a thin dossier on Crowley's World War I activities. This handful of documents contained one critical piece of information. During the war, the American investigators, while probing the activities of suspected German spies, discovered that, quote, Aleister Crowley was an employee of the British government. In this country on official business, of which the British consul, New York City, has full cognizance, unquote. Thus, Crowley's claim to have been His Majesty's servant was true, after all, at least to some degree. Of course, this leads to the harder questions of what he did and with whom and why. My preliminary exploration of those and related issues, Secret Agent 666, and the British Intelligence in America, 1914 to 1918, appeared in the International Journal of Intelligence and Counterintelligence in the fall of 2000. Still immersed in the Riley book and with other research projects in the pipeline, I did not intend to dig any deeper into Crowley's intrigues. Over the years, however, the article achieved a peculiar life of its own. Crowley fans, Crowley haters, and others simply intrigued spread it across the internet. Before long, I was receiving messages offering comments, information, and above all, encouragement to look farther into Crowley's involvement in espionage. Reluctantly at first, but with mounting enthusiasm as pieces of the puzzle came together, I went to work. The result is this book. Okay, I'm not going to go on. Although I'm really tempted, I just love to read the whole book to you, but I don't want to do that. I don't know if it's on audiobook yet, but the book is Secret Agent 666, Aleister Crowley and the British Intelligence and the Occult, by Richard B. Spence, author of Trust No One, The Secret World of Sidney Riley. And we're all familiar with the reason that John Dee opened the entire Enochian magic can of worms was initially to spy in an attempt to literally magically remote view as a spy for Queen Elizabeth. Dee just wanted to sit in the comfort of his his home, I guess, wherever it was, and remote view. Tune in on the crown princes of Europe and what they were thinking about Queen Elizabeth. And of course, Dee was a flat out spy for Elizabeth. I mean, what do you think he was doing in Poland? What do you think he was traipsing all over Europe to do? Uh, he proudly was Elizabeth's first secret agent. I mentioned that I attended a lecture at the International Spy Museum, well, in Washington, D.C. Well, that museum has a whole exhibit of John Dee. Okay, it has a whole John Dee. Uh, Perhaps someday they'll have an exhibit about Aleister Crowley. Uh, if they have one about me, I'm sure it will be spurious. Anyway, that's Sunday school for today. And oh, Constance gave me a haircut and a beard trim yesterday. And I took my new look to like Berkeley, North Berkeley area last night, and I did a little lecture for the Swedenborg Swedenborgian Society of the East Bay. I did a little talk on magic and Freemasonry. So that's about as far as I've been out of Sacramento since we moved here. So I'd like to thank them all. And I'll see you tomorrow for the order of Monday morning. Until then, continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.